Hello, everyone. I am Dr. MJ, your summit host, and I'm super excited because I am here with Sandy Adams. Sandy is a brand strategist who helps others elevate stories to a brand. And she's going to talk about how she leaned into her creativity as an entrepreneur and how she used her storytelling talents to build her own successful company and brand. So, welcome, Sandy.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, we're really glad to have you. So, I guess starting out, if you can tell us a little bit about your work and the work that you do as an entrepreneur, that'd be a great start.
Sure. What some may not know is I actually started as a photographer back in 2010, and I built my brand up in Houston, Texas. And as the years went through, I started adding more and more stuff because I was working with businesses and I was using social media myself to market myself without having to pay ads. I had used some paid marketing, and it wasn't really working. And that was when Facebook and Instagram were really taking off. And so I started with that. So I started as a photographer. And as my business kind of grew and I started pivoting more and started picking up actual social media clients, then I just started pivoting more towards social media and to brand strategy specifically.
Yeah, no, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And see, a lot of the work you do requires a certain level of creativity, especially you start
Yes.
as a photographer, and then you do brand strategy. So you're having to think creative and innovative constantly and just be in that creative space. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And for those out there that maybe aren't currently working in a creative space but want to be more creative, I actually spent 15 years in the intermodal trucking industry. And so I went from doing accounting, working with truck drivers, handling over the road repairs, that type of work on a regular basis, to wanting to do more creative stuff. And it was always in my DNA to be creative. But what I had to do was just force myself to start. And what I will say is once you start becoming more creative. You actually have to, it's like riding a bike. If you don't keep riding a bike or start riding a bike, you don't learn how to ride the bike better. And it's the same way. You have to start being creative. And the more you are creative, the more it comes to you on a regular basis.
Yes, I love that you said that because I think a lot of times what holds people back is, oh, well, I don't have that
That's exactly right.
ability. I've never done anything that requires me to be that creative, so I don't think I can do it. Whereas you brought up a great point is a lot of times we don't realize what we can do until we're in the situation of, oh,
Right.
okay, I have to learn how to do this.
That's
Like,
right.
for example, I'll give an example. One of the things I love to do is I love creating stuff on Canva now. And
Yes.
nothing that I ever enjoyed before. I didn't do a lot of flyers and
Right.
videos and marketing. But you figure out other areas that you're good at and your strengths. And it sounds like, that was definitely the case for you. And I know it's been the case for other folks as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And just a little bit of an add-on to that is one thing that I've kind of learned is I start paying attention to where I get my creativity, like what sparks it. And for me, driving, and when I lived in Houston, I took a lot, I'd go out on Saturdays and Sundays and just drive a lot. And I would see things maybe it's as a photographer, visually, I'm stimulated by certain images and things just come into my head. And so the more that I realized what stimulated my creativity, the more I was able to kind of put myself in those situations. Music is another thing. Lyrics light up my mind. And also looking, if you go back and look at any of my photography website and look at the specifics of that, Vogue magazine and Vanity Fair magazine, the more I recognized my creative parts, the more things inspired me, the more their images inspired me to go out and do things of my own. So it's really about paying attention to what sparks that creativity into you and then being able to go out and put yourself in those situations. It doesn't mean it's going to come automatically, but it is something that you have to pay attention to. And you're not going to know that on the front end. You just kind of have to start going out, and keeping a journal is a great idea. On how that creative journey can flow, and paying attention to what puts you in that creative spirit.
Yes, love that. Oh, love the music piece too, because I can really relate to you on that one. When I listen to certain music, I'm like, okay, I'm in the zone. I'm
Right.
coming up with something here that I know I haven't came up with before, and we're going to get really creative in this moment. One of the questions I have for you, because you mentioned that you used to work, and you said you worked for a company, and basically what you were doing was completely different.
Yes,
You know,
very
you do
different.
yeah, you talked about everything from accounting and just some of the day-to-day tasks that you see in more traditional 9 to 5 positions. And so the question I have for you is, do you feel like you would be able to tap into this creative side of yourself if you were still working, in a traditional 9 to 5 position?
That's a hard question because I had done it part-time for several years. And then my husband and I, at the time, our business went out of business. And so I was forced at that time. And I was in a position where I could kind of go full-time and do that. But looking back, I think it would have taken me several more years and maybe something pushing me to that. And I didn't have anybody saying, hey, you should put more effort into this. And I think that's where, as women, we can support each other and really trying to push, see what somebody else wants to do and being that motivating factor. And that, from my brand strategy point, and we can talk about that at the end again, is where I really focus on women and encouraging women to see their potential and really pushing them to, a lot of times families they're not objective, and so just being that person that can help them and just push them into doing more. Because I wish I had had somebody push me more, and I probably could have done it part-time for a good long while and then gone full-time, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah. And you know what? You brought up so many great points, especially the one about the family may not always understand, or even some friends, if they're not entrepreneurs or they've never owned a business. It's just such a unique thing to do, and that's why it's important to connect with other women.
It is, and a lot of times, what I have also realized is that so many people, when they give you their opinion, they speak to that opinion from a place of fear of their own. So they may not, like, I've had friends of mine who would never, ever think of not having a steady paycheck. And they would always be like, when are you going to get a job? When are you going to get a job? When are you going to get a job? Instead of like trying to encourage me to do. So I've really realized that people come at it from a place of fear. And what I would encourage all women that want to take that entrepreneurial point is to look at the person that's talking to them and realize that they're probably speaking from their own fears, and that a lot of times we just have to go by what we feel right doing is really what it comes down to.
I love that. Yes. And you're so right, because I do have family members and friends who still send me job descriptions.
Yes.
And they're sending those things, and I'm like, I got a business. But it happens all the time, and it does come from a place of people just may not fully understand it, which is why it's so important for women to connect and build that camaraderie. And so I know that's an area you're passionate about. Can you speak a little bit more about the work you do in terms of, working specifically with women and like the kind of work that you do to help people build that confidence? I may want to work with you after this.
Yes. So I've been working for a nonprofit out of Houston for 5 years, and I teach job search, and I teach it to mid-level executives. And when I started in Houston, we were obviously in person. I lived there, and I've since relocated back during the pandemic. But I had these women come in. They all had college degrees. A lot of them had PhDs. A lot of them had master's degrees. We had so many chemical engineers coming in from oil and gas industry. But every one of these women, for the most part, they couldn't see their value. They couldn't see, they were scared to introduce themselves to people they did not know. When I would ask them, what do you think your value is? They didn't know, because they had so long evaluated their value with a job title and thus a paycheck. And, what I'm going to say is, I'm not a photographer. Like, I don't do photography every day, but I'm still a photographer. And when we get caught up in connecting ourselves with a person, a place, an organization, a business, then when we're no longer associated with them, we lose our value. And what I saw was that so many women did not have their self-confidence just standing from themselves. And that made me, really find myself. I loved motivating women. I loved doing it every week. I loved sharing my failures. I loved sharing how, I pulled myself up from zero. Like I started completely over at the age of 49, no husband, no job, no family, nothing. I started completely over. And so, it took a lot of me to pull myself out and to be vulnerable. But on the other hand, I saw these women that suddenly took themselves and pulled themselves up and was like, if she can do it, I can do it. And she believes in me. And it goes back to that. You need to be around people who are objective about you, who want the best for you. And that cannot be your family and friends, because they have so many other things going on in your relationship. And it was just something that I started falling in love with every single week when I would meet these women, and I would see like suddenly before my eyes just becoming more self-confident, going out. I had one lady, I worked with her 2 years ago, and she wrote me this letter of recommendation. And she said, after 2 months of going to your classes once a week, my husband looked at me one day and said, I don't know who you are any longer. You're not the same person, but I love who you're becoming. And, she suddenly, the more that they see themselves and the more they see the results coming, the better and more confident they feel about themselves. And to me, that's the best feeling in the world. It really is.
Yes, I love that. And the fact that you've been able to help bring the best out of people, that is, I think, a talent and a skill, and it speaks to, just your talent and what you're called to do. I mean, I'm really in awe of you. Of course, I've had a chance to meet you on multiple occasions, and every time I'm around you, I'm like, I just love her energy. I just love it. Yeah. So let me ask you this. What are some of the biggest things you've learned about yourself on this entrepreneurial path? Like what did you learn about yourself that maybe you didn't know before?
So one thing that I learned was that I am a survivor. Mm-hmm. I always kind of thought I was, but I've gone through probably 3 major events in my life that really knocked me down to the bare minimum. And I've been able to, pick myself back up and kind of pivot. And being a survivor, and also knowing that I look at myself and I look at what other people say and what they feel. And I never count myself out. And that's something that I've really had to pull back into myself this past year and just really keep reminding myself of where I've come. I think a lot of times we don't want to revisit the past, but I think we should, because it's important that we see where we've come so that we know that if we come to that type of situation again, we will make it through it. It's going to be okay. And just teaching women to be observant about their resilience and about, so many times we're focused on what's going on at this very moment instead of looking at where we've come, looking what we've overcome, and knowing that we can do it again. We are stronger and better than we were yesterday or the day before, and just reminding ourselves of that. And that, for me, it's something that I do put into practice quite often. And so that would be my biggest thing that I've learned is just resilience.
Yes, I love that. I like I said, I have a lot of admiration for you, Sandy, and I commend you for the work that you're doing, because I think it's necessary. There's so many women out there, and this is part of the reason why I decided to do the summit, right? I hear a lot of women say, like, I really want to do this, but I'm scared to take the leap. I'm scared. I don't know if I have it.
That's the biggest thing, is the fear.
Fear. Yeah. And just, so when you touched on that resiliency piece, it really struck a chord with me, because if you think about a lot of things we do in life, I mean, you're taking a leap of faith in a lot of things, but we don't always see it that way. And so, yes, entrepreneurship it requires you to be resilient, and you have to be able to pivot when necessary. But I mean, a lot of things in life are like that. And so
They are. And the one thing that, has really helped me, and I remember the day that the company my ex and I were running, and it was the day we really went out of business, literally. And I remember, I had all these fears. What if I'm not going to be able to make payroll? What if I'm not going to be able to, pay the electric bill? We were running three huge warehouses 24/7. And I remember that day I couldn't pay the electric bill and I couldn't make payroll for the drivers. And I had always been so scared of that day when it came. And when that day came, it didn't kill me. And so what I've told so many of my clients and my students is, think about what is the worst thing that can happen if you choose this direction. And if you can live with that worst thing, and if it's not going to kill you, then what's stopping you?
Yes. Love that. Yes. Well, you know what? I want to work with you for sure after this. And for, other women who would love to connect with you and learn more about your work, where can they find out more about your work and how to connect with you?
So they can go to sandy-adams.com. That's my main website, and all the information is there. I do career coaching, I do brand strategy, and I think a lot of women don't necessarily understand what brand strategy is, and they probably think they don't need it. But it goes back to that, taking your story, who you are, what you've been through, what you want to do, and making it the top tier and not necessarily your job title, because that's what's allowed me to pivot, is that I keep my main focus telling stories, okay? Helping people tell their stories. I started that in photography, telling people stories through their portraits. And I carried that into social media, into brand strategy, into helping people make their businesses better. And it's the same red thread through everything. And that if women can just understand, what is it that you're passionate about, lead with that and not your job title. I think that would be the best suggestion forever. But yes, go to sandy-adams.com, and I would love to chat and work something out and start working with as many women as I can, because I really love specializing in working with women.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you, and thank you so much for your time today. Yeah, no. Was there any last bits of advice that anybody who's thinking about doing a career change or even taking the entrepreneurial leap, like any last advice that you would leave that person with?
I would say really sit down and write down all of the reasons why you want to do it. Why? Write down and then try to narrow it down to one big thing and figure out what it is you want to do with that why. Because I think so many times we start businesses, we start projects, we start any type of things like that, and we forget the why. Why do we want to do this? And that's something that whenever I get to a point, and it can be in the middle of the week, where I'm like, okay, what am I doing? I don't know what to post today. I don't know what to write about. And I always go back and I'm like, what is my why? What is my why? Why do I want to do this? The why should lead everything. And so that would be my one bit of advice, is to figure out what your why is and start from there.
Yes, love it. Well, thank you for all of the golden nuggets you have given.
You're welcome.
I'm sure, I definitely gained a lot from our conversation, and I'm sure our participants will take away a lot from this discussion as well. So I appreciate your time.
You're quite welcome.
Awesome.